Okay, so every week I do a weekly update of what's going on in Ukraine. I used to try to cover every article that I thought was relevant, and it just became too onerous. When you have a dozen articles a day times seven, that becomes somewhat problematic. So a few iterations back, I decided, okay, here's the big story for today, and here's what you might have missed. Now, I usually do this on Mondays every week, but last week was Christmas, so that bumped it to Tuesday or Wednesday, and then this week was New Year's, so it is now Tuesday, January 2nd, and here are the big stories from the past week. That is from Christmas Day to New Year's Day. Okay, so the big story would have been on Christmas Day well, there's two big stories. One, the Ukrainians are celebrating Christmas with the West on December 25th, as opposed to an Orthodox Christmas later on in January. But the big story was that Ukraine claimed to shoot down two more Russian fighter jets. And this was after they had already shot down three fighter jets. And this was a big thing. And Russia had to be scratching its head trying to figure out what was going on. The small story that you might have heard about, but it might not have been. Alexei Navalny was just discovered in a remote Arctic penal colony. Now, he was moved and nobody knew where he was. People were speculating that he was dead, but apparently he was moved to an Arctic penal colony. Now, if you're Putin, you don't want Navalny anywhere being able to spread his message, so you move him to the most remote place you can. He'll probably get moved again. If I was guessing, he'll probably get moved again sometime before the elections, just so they can keep, him out of reach. Okay, Tuesday, 26 December 2023, tactical aviation destroys Russian landing ship in Novocherkassk, okay, with cruise missiles. So this hit, and it hit a landing ship that apparently had missiles on it or some kind of munitions. And initially, the reports were one person was killed, two people injured, and the commander said nobody was killed. Well, there were 73 sailors signed to that ship, and they had just filled it up with missiles, and there was a huge boom, and it was unbelievable, the idea that nobody was hurt. But apparently that would come out later on. Yes, apparently dozens were killed, other dozens were injured, and it was a very bad thing. Not only that ship, but another ship was destroyed, a smaller boat nearby, a warehouse nearby. It was a pretty big black eye for the Russians. Okay, what you might have missed were in Pravda and RT. There were a number of really interesting stories that were just kind of propaganda pieces. So Pravda had a story, misbelief that may destroy Russia. They make us believe that we have already won. So if they're making you believe that Russia already won so that you'll kind of go to sleep or, forget. I don't even, yeah. Okay, second one was Ukraine's cannon fodder distracted by missile attack on Crimean port. Okay, I love that headline. Ukraine's cannon fodder. You're trying to take Avdiivka, and you're just throwing men into the meat grinder, and you're talking about Ukraine's cannon fodder. But it is true that the front line is not moving nearly as fast as the big things like the attack in the port and other big missile and those kind of attacks. Ukraine has to fight in an asymmetric way where Russia just keeps throwing people into Avdiivka. And then the third one was, and I did a video about this today, RT's holiday video pokes fun at Russia's meddling narratives. And if you haven't seen that video, go back and look at that video. It's a really bizarre take on their... Okay, so it's their holiday video, kind of like the one last year where they had, they had to eat the pet hamster or something. It's that kind of thing where they take control over Joe Biden electronically. Yeah, okay. At any rate, that's what you missed. You didn't miss much there. Okay, Wednesday, 27 December. So the big story was there that the U.S. announced its final drawdown of military aid for Ukraine. That's big, right? I mean, we really need to get on the stick and get this together. What you missed, though, was that the war cost Kyiv $120 million per day. Now you can do the math and multiply it, and that's just to keep it running. And then what you also missed was that there are a number of stories, and these are increasing. I'm seeing a lot more now, that the Biden administration is quietly shifting Ukraine's strategy to focus on negotiations. I see this in reputable newspapers talking about it, but I don't know that in fact it has happened or what is going on exactly, but it's becoming more and more of a story. And it's like that story is creating a snowball of stories that, see, this is a shift. This is what's really happening. So we got to be careful with that kind of thing. And we'll follow that. Thursday, December 28th. Okay, the big story on Thursday was that more Ukrainian children from Ukraine's Russia-held regions are arriving in Belarus despite global outrage. I talked about that briefly in my 3-minute, here are the 3 big stories in 3 minutes. But what you might have missed was that the war is really different than previous wars. There are 2 stories side by side that really explain this. The first one in Yahoo was Russia's electronic warfare tactics are helping it turn the tide against Ukraine. And the second one was this was in Radio Free Europe, wars will be different, say Ukrainians team 3D printing drone parts. So drones are really the way that wars are going to be fought moving forward, and they're having a significant effect. I don't mean drones like in Star Wars, but I mean drones on the battlefield are what tanks were in World War II, or planes in World War II. It's something significantly changing the way that armies fight each other. Okay, Friday, December 29th, Ukraine is hit by a large-scale air attack. I mean, this is the largest scale air attack of the entire war. There were 90-ish missiles and a bunch more drones added up to there was more than 110 missiles, I think, and 90 of a particular type. I think there was more than 110 missiles and the balance of drones up to 159 attacking all day on the 29th. What you might have missed was that one of these missiles actually went through Polish airspace, but Poland did nothing except for say some words about it, and so it's probably going to happen again. What you also missed, unless you were listening to me, was that that strike cost Russia $1.2 billion. $1.2 billion is 1.4% of its 2023 military budget. Almost 1.5% of the entire military budget for the year in one day's strike. I mean, that was pretty amazing. Okay, Saturday, the 30th of December. So the big stories were the death toll from that strike the day before keeps rising. And Russia, so Ukraine hits back, and then Russia is calling it a terrorist strike when Ukraine hits back. And they even called, you might have missed this, they even called for a UN Security Council meeting because people were killed in Belgorod. Well, the background to that is it appears that Russia placed its artillery or its missiles behind Belgorod. So when Ukraine is trying to strike that and it's shot down over Belgorod. So good job, Russia. Okay, Sunday, 31 December. Wave of Russian strikes on Kharkiv after Ukrainian attack of Belgorod. So you had the biggest, then you had the Belgorod, and as well as other places that Ukraine struck Russia. And then you have Russia striking back again. And Vladimir Putin, you might have missed this, made little mention of Ukraine in his New Year's speech. Elsewhere, he's going to say that he's going to vow, revenge for Belgorod. But he didn't say that in his New Year's speech, which I found absolutely fascinating. His New Year's speech was a bunch of platitudes about how we're one peoples and mighty Russia, and we're going to stand together because we're unified and it's for the Russian motherland. It's that kind of stuff. But he didn't say anything about Ukraine, which I thought was really strange. Okay, Monday, 1st of January, Putin vows to intensify the war and the attacks on Ukraine. That was separate than the other speech. And then Russia launches a record number of drones in Ukraine, and Putin says Moscow will intensify these attacks. So the drones are actually a smarter strategy for Russia. They don't do as much damage as the missiles, but you can swarm with drones and they cost a lot less. So the drones on the first actually cost Russia $1.8 million, which is about $20,000 per drone, which is far, far less than spending $10 million per rocket and sending 90 of those and then costing yourself $1.2 billion. Now, they're not as effective, but okay. And then the last thing on Monday was, so in the Kyiv Post, there was a top 10 of pro-Ukraine YouTube warriors to guide you through 2024, and included Combat Arms Channel and Pavlo from Ukraine, and I made the list. Now, I shouldn't be on that list by rights. It should be Jake Bro and Anna and Vlad and those guys, but I made the list, and I was glad to be on the list. But you know what? I was even more glad last week for this fundraiser. So what happened was, on Christmas Day, Greg Terry and I kicked off this fundraiser for Ukraine, gauze and tourniquets and bandages and thermals and even drones, right? And then we just kept updating. So here's giving update 1. We're already to 18,000. And by giving update 2, we were up to 20 something thousand, 26 or 30,000, something in that neighborhood. By giving update 4, and then we're almost at 100,000. We got to $100,000 2 days ago, and we are up to, as of yesterday, north of 100,000. Well, I think it was 116. And we'll continue to keep you posted. That's all the news. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.